Officer Rachel Monroe had always believed that strength meant standing tall, showing no weakness, especially as one of the few female officers in a precinct still saturated with old-school bravado. But all of that changed the night she was called to a remote farm on the edge of town, responding to reports of illegal dogfighting, and discovered a bloodied, near-lifeless German shepherd chained to a rusting pole behind the barn, surrounded by empty food bowls, splintered bones, and the foul scent of neglect. The dog didn't growl, didn't flinch, didn't even lift his head, just stared with dull, glassy eyes that spoke of agony and betrayal deeper than any Rachel had ever seen in human eyes. And something in her broke, not out of pity, but recognition, because she too had once been caged, emotionally battered by a father who believed silence was love and discipline was loyalty. So she crouched beside the shepherd, who weighed barely half what he should, and whispered, "I see you," again and again, until he closed his eyes and nudged her knee with a trembling snout. The vet said he might not survive the night, and even if he did, he'd never be fit for duty. But Rachel stayed by his side in the sterile clinic, sleeping on the floor with her hand on his paw, and when he opened his eyes again that morning, she knew his fight wasn't over. Not just because he had life left, but because they had something to prove together. She named him Valor, not because he had ever been brave in combat, but because surviving cruelty and still choosing to trust was the bravest thing she'd ever seen. And as he healed, fur slowly returning to patchy skin, weight gaining ounce by painful ounce, they began their own quiet training. Not sanctioned by the department at first, but grounded in mutual patience and a fierce determination that grew between early dawn runs and midnight ball sessions under streetlights, until one day, Valor stopped flinching at sudden sounds, stopped recoiling from outstretched hands, and instead stood tall at Rachel's side, as if he had always belonged there. When she petitioned the department to certify Valor as a K-9 unit, they laughed at first, called him a rescue case, a liability. But then came the warehouse break-in, when Rachel and Valor were first on scene and stumbled into a 4-man robbery in progress. While backup was en route, one suspect lunged at Rachel with a crowbar, and Valor, sensing the threat before she did, launched himself forward, intercepting the blow and taking a deep gash across his side, yet still managing to bring the man down with such force that the others fled. And from that moment on, no one questioned Valor's place again. They became inseparable, a team known throughout the city not for aggression, but for precision, empathy, and unshakable loyalty. Valor had a gift for sensing trauma, often leaning into frightened children during domestic calls, or guiding elderly victims gently toward safety, and Rachel, always quiet, found her voice growing louder through him, advocating for canine therapy programs and pushing for reforms in how the force treated retired canines. But time, relentless as ever, began to catch up, and after nearly 6 years of service, Valor's joints stiffened, his movements slower, and the department retired him with full honors, an emotional ceremony where even the toughest officers wiped their eyes as Rachel held her partner's head and whispered a private thank you only he would understand. They spent retirement in a little cottage near the forest's edge, where Valor could roam and nap on sunlit porches, and Rachel could finally breathe without radios crackling or sirens screaming. She wrote their story in a journal she never intended to publish, just needing to put into words what Valor had done for her, how he'd turned a guarded, wounded cop into a human capable of love again. When Valor's final day came, a soft autumn breeze blowing through the turning leaves, he rested his head in Rachel's lap beneath their favorite oak tree, and she stroked his ears as he slipped away, telling him he was a good boy, the best boy, her boy. Words she had never dared to say out loud to anyone else. Rachel buried him wrapped in the flag he was awarded for bravery, with his service vest folded beside him and a small plaque at the base of the tree that read, "He taught me how to heal." And though the house felt achingly empty in the days that followed, she began volunteering at the local shelter, walking skittish dogs and whispering, "I see you," the way she once had to a forgotten shepherd in the dirt behind a barn, because some love is too powerful to end, too brave to forget, and too sacred to ever truly be lost. And so Rachel kept showing up, day after day, rain or shine, her boots crunching across gravel as she entered the shelter's gates with a quiet nod to the staff, carrying nothing but a leash, a pocket full of treats, and a heart still cracked but pulsing with purpose. The dog seemed to sense something in her, a gentleness buried beneath her uniformed past, a patience shaped by loss, and while some barked or cowered, the most wounded of them would lock eyes with her, and, in time, edge forward, as if pulled by an invisible thread of trust, one she had once followed herself. Among them was a ragged young German shepherd mix named Theo, who had been rescued from a highway ditch, one leg broken, ribs poking through fur that had never known a brush, and who refused to eat, refused to meet anyone's gaze, until Rachel knelt beside him, whispering nothing, just being there, a presence steady as stone. And after a full week, Theo pressed his head against her hand, not in surrender, but in the first fragile step toward believing that not all humans hurt. Rachel didn't plan to adopt again. Not so soon, not while Valor's name still echoed in every hallway of her heart. But Theo wasn't a replacement. He was a continuation, the next chapter in a story that still had pages left to write. And when she signed the adoption forms, she paused just long enough to write a single word under reason for adoption: healing. Theo came home to a quieter version of the house Valor once roamed, and though he was different, more skittish, more uncertain, he began to learn the rhythm of safety, the sound of kibble in a bowl, the touch of a hand that never struck, the comfort of falling asleep without fear of being dragged awake. Slowly, Rachel introduced him to the woods Valor had loved, to the scent trails and breezes, and the soft crackle of dry leaves underfoot. And sometimes, when they reached the old oak tree, Theo would sit beside her, as if sensing the ghost of the dog who had come before him, and Rachel would smile through the ache, because love like Valor's didn't vanish. It transformed, echoing through every life it touched. Weeks turned into months, and as Theo's coat thickened and his eyes grew bright, Rachel found herself speaking out again, now at community centers and schools, sharing stories not just about crime and justice, but about resilience, redemption, and what it truly meant to protect and serve, not just people, but the voiceless companions who stood beside them. She launched a local initiative named Valor Lives, helping retired K9s and abandoned working breeds find safe homes, providing training, vet care, and emotional support for both the dogs and the humans who needed them. And each time a hardened veteran cradled a shaking rescue in their lap, or a child with autism hugged a dog for the first time, Rachel felt a ripple of peace bloom inside her, knowing that Valor's legacy was more than medals or memories. It was this: love passed forward, one broken heart at a time. On the second anniversary of Valor's passing, Rachel and Theo returned to the oak tree, a bouquet of wildflowers in her hand and a police badge carved from wood in the other, which she laid gently at the base of the stone marker. Theo sniffed it, then curled beside her, resting his head in her lap as if he, too, felt the weight of the moment. And as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in warm oranges and golds, Rachel whispered again. "Thank you, my boy." Her voice steady, no longer broken, because grief had become gratitude, and the silence that once haunted her heart now pulsed with quiet meaning, wrapped in the soft exhale of a dog finally at peace beside a woman who had learned, through the loyalty of a German shepherd, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is love again. In the months that followed that golden evening beneath the oak tree, life unfolded, not in grand gestures, but in quiet, beautiful moments, the kind that don't make headlines, but heal you from the inside out. Rachel and Theo settled into a rhythm, not unlike the one she once shared with Valor, yet different in texture. Softer, more cautious, as if the universe had learned how fragile the human heart could be. Each morning began with Theo waiting patiently by the door, tail thumping gently, eyes filled not with fear anymore, but anticipation. They would walk the wooded trails near their home, Rachel sipping coffee from a thermos as Theo sniffed out new scents, occasionally looking back to check she was still there. And she always was. No longer the driven, battle-worn officer clinging to duty like armor, but a woman rediscovering the quiet joy of simply being. The past no longer chased her. It walked beside her, still present, still aching sometimes, but no longer paralyzing. Then came a phone call that stirred old instincts. A nearby precinct had lost one of their own, Officer James Medina, a young cop killed in the line of duty. His canine partner, a German shepherd named Jet, had survived the ambush but had gone missing afterward, slipping his leash in a panic during the chaos. For days, officers and volunteers searched the area, leaving food out, calling his name, praying he hadn't been hit by a car or fallen prey to the wild. Rachel saw the news and felt her chest tighten. She knew the look in a dog's eyes after trauma. She'd seen it in Theo, and in herself. Without hesitation, she packed water, snacks, and Theo's gear. They joined the search that same day, combing through ravines, under bridges, and across open fields. For hours, they found nothing, just silence and wind. But on the third day, deep in a wooded area near the river, Theo froze. His ears pricked forward, body alert. Rachel followed his line of sight, and there, barely visible in the tall grass, was a shape, crouched, watching. Jet. He was thinner now, his black and tan coat matted, his eyes wild with confusion. But something in him sparked when he saw Theo, another shepherd, calm and grounded, who didn't advance but simply sat down, tongue lolling, waiting. Rachel knew better than to rush. She knelt and began talking, not commanding, but offering, coaxing with nothing more than the truth in her voice, that he was safe, that someone still cared, that he wasn't alone. Jet crept forward, inch by trembling inch, until finally his nose touched her hand and collapsed in exhausted surrender. Jet came home with them that night. It was never the plan to keep him, but as days passed and the department debated what to do with a retired, traumatized dog, Rachel made the decision quietly. Jet would stay, not just for himself, but for Theo, who had found a strange solace in the presence of another soul stitched back together by time, patience, and love. The three of them, Rachel, Theo, and Jet, became something resembling a family. They healed each other in unspoken ways, shared silence, nightly routines, gentle nudges during nightmares, soft breathing curled together on the couch. Rachel's small non-profit, Valor Lives, grew with new energy. Jet became a therapy dog for grieving officers and their families. Theo, once the broken stray, now helped train volunteers on how to approach fearful rescues. And Rachel, once a woman haunted by ghosts, became a quiet beacon of hope, for those who had lost everything. In every speech, every rescue, every whispered comfort to a trembling pup, the spirit of valor lived on. And late at night, when the house fell quiet and both dogs lay sleeping, Jet by the door, Theo at her feet, Rachel would often walk out to the oak tree alone, stare up at the stars and whisper, "You saved me more than once, boy. And through them, you still do."